it's Penny Black and Jill Foster here for a PB&J card class, and today I'll be making a card with our new slapstick cling stamp called Kissing Frogs, and I think this is just the funnest little image, and the sentiment that comes as part of the set is also really fun too. Here's a list of all the supplies that I'll be using in creating today's card, including a list here of the Copic colors I'll be using to color her in. And I just wanted to mention that I will put both of those supply lists back up at the very end of the video on screen. So if you want to look at them in more detail at that time, you can just hit pause and look at them as long as you would like. So to begin, I stamped this image onto Neenah Solar White cardstock using Memento Tuxedo Black ink. I did do that in my stamp positioning tool so that I was able to do multiple impressions and get a nice dark outline to the image. And I'm going to color this in using Copic markers. I'm doing very simple coloring on this image, and it would be great for whatever your favorite type of coloring is. You could use colored pencils. I think it would be really fun to do a real whimsical light watercolor. So it's really something you can use to fit your personal coloring style. For her hair, I kept things very simple, but if you love to do shading, this hair I think would be really fun to add lots of depth and dimension to all of those wavy layers. I just did one light color and then went in with my darker color sort of in different areas where it looked like it would be sort of bending down and creating like a valley to the hair, and then I'll go back and blend those out with that lighter color again. But really, you can do a lot of fun things with this hair. My background had a lot of different elements and was busier, so I felt like I just didn't want to do too much on this, and so I just kept things pretty simple. And here you can see where I'm just going back and adding a few touches here and there. Next, I'll work on her dress. There was a little part there that I thought was hair, but turns out it's the dress, but no problem because the dress I am coloring in a much darker color. I am starting with my darkest color and feathering that in, and then I'll go back and blend that with my medium and lighter colors. And I'm mostly just keeping things sort of darker where it would be behind with the hair on top of it and around the outer edges, and lighter towards the middle. I want it to look balanced and have variation from light to dark, but other than that, I'm not too worried about light source or anything like that. When I color, I don't want to do too much thinking, so this is sort of my way of coloring with Copic markers. I'm doing the same thing up here on her crown. I think this stamp offers so many different opportunities for coloring because you can totally change the look of this by changing the color of her hair or the crown or her dress. There's just so many different ways you can make her look different. And it's so fun and whimsical. I love these little mushrooms that are mixed into the scene. And I will be fussy cutting this out. So I like that how those mushrooms are sort of attached to parts of the scene. So when I cut this out, I just have to cut one outline around everything. But you could also do a lot of fun shading if you didn't want to cut this out and just stamped it, say, on watercolor paper, or stamped it flat and added your scene to the background using masking over the main portion of the image. So just lots and lots of different options for this. I'm moving in here working on the log, just adding, again, just some darker areas where it would be along the bottom, behind those mushrooms. But this stamp has a lot of detail included in the illustration. So if you are new to shading or new to coloring, this is also a great stamp for you because no matter how you color it, if you just do one solid color on the log, one solid color for her hair, there's still a lot of detail there and your image will look great. Next, I'm going to move up and work on the frogs. And for these, I found it was fun just to add a touch of sort of a turquoise look. So I'm just starting with a green in a few spots, and then I'll go back and blend that with a more turquoise color. So just sort of going over that green and feathering it towards the white areas. And as I color in my images, I like to kind of have in my mind what colors I would like to use on the background. So for this one, I was thinking if I put a touch of turquoise here on these frogs, then I will be able to use that on my background and have something just a little bit different than the standard blue sky. And so I can do more of a turquoise green sky, and it will tie into the image that I've colored. I like to stamp images like this and stamp several of them, and then just sit down and color them whenever I have a chance, and then cut them out, and then go back later and create my scene and my background. Now I felt like the log just needed a little bit more darker colors, so I'm actually using a darker gray marker, touching my brown marker to the tip of that, and then feathering that onto the log. And that's another way to get more from your markers. I didn't have a dark enough brown in my collection, and this way I was able to get the shading that I wanted with the markers that I already had. And I did just color with that brown marker off to the side to remove any excess gray that may have remained on it. Then I can go in with my lighter brown and just finish blending that out. Now I went ahead and fussy cut that image, and now I'm taking a memento marker in the color of tuxedo black and just going around the edges of the cutting, and this hides any imperfections. So don't be scared of fussy cutting these images. If you don't get it just right, which I never do, I'm not super patient with cutting, it really doesn't matter. Doing this step and also adding just a touch of distress ink, I'm used the color of Vintage Photo, around the edges will hide any spots where you didn't get it cut perfectly, or you just didn't feel like getting in there into an area. It will just hide it for you. So once she was ready to go, I'm ready to work on my background. So I went through my stash of dies and found some that I felt really fit the size of that image. I'll be using a few of the berry branches, the dainty tulips, and also using our antique frame. And that is a die I use all the time. I kind of laid those out as I was pulling them out of my stash, and then I'm ready to work on coloring all of those. So here is that antique frame. This is like the handiest die. I use it all the time. I'm going to ink up the background. I'm going to start with distress ink in the color of peacock feathers, and I'm starting off of the edge and working my way on in a circular motion with a very light pressure. And to build up the darkness or the intensity of that color, I do that by adding more layers, not necessarily by pressing harder when I do the layers. To give this more of a greenish turquoise look, I'm very lightly adding a layer of cracked pistachio distress ink. So distress ink colors are a transparent color, so you can layer and mix them right there on your paper till you get the shade that you want and that matches your focal point image that you've already colored. And I'm just checking that there if I like how that looks with the frogs. And I decided I wanted it to be a little bit more green just so that it matched up with the frogs a little bit better. So I grabbed a memento ink in the color of bamboo leaves, and now I'm much happier with that look. So you can mix and match your inking types of ink for the background. I'm picking basically by the colors that I like. I'm adding a little bit of gathered twigs distress ink to the bottom, to the ground, the scene. And here is using that same antique frame die cut. I also cut a frame element to go around the outer edge. And I want this to have the same colors that are happening in the background. So it gives visual interest, but it isn't so bold that it takes away from the focal point image. So I just put gathered twigs there along the bottom. And then I'll use those other colors here on the top of this frame, just like I did for the background. By using the frame, it also gives a place to sort of nestle in some of those background die cuts that I'll be using in a bit. So that's another just tip if you're looking in creating a scene, look for a way or a place that you can sort of stick and nestle in the images that you've chosen for the background. To color the flowers, which were cut from Nina's Solar White cardstock, I'm using Copic markers so that I can match them up to the coloring that I did on the focal point image or to that little girl. And I am just feathering those on, starting with the darker color and then moving up towards the lighter color. I did mix in some orange here, and you will see I will go back, and I decided I wanted it to be a little bit more red at the bottom. So I thought I just wanted a totally orange flower on this, but it just, when I put it with the scene, it just needed a little more red to tie into her dress. So here I'm adding that at the base of those flowers, and then I'll go back and blend that in. And there we go with the lightest color. I did die cut a couple of hearts, and I'll have that die listed at the very end of the video. And these I colored with the same colors of her dress and her crown. So I took all those pieces that I've colored and I arranged them in my MISTI and held them down with the magnet so that I can decide where I want to put that sentiment. So none of those are glued down yet, but they're just being held with those magnets, which is so handy so you can get your sentiment right where you want it. And I am stamping that using archival ink in the color of potting soil. It's a nice rich brown. It's not stark black, but it's dark enough to have an impact. I find it's a great color for sentiments. And I'm doing multiple impressions just so that it's a very crisp, clear image and also darkens it up each time. So I went ahead and I adhered my frame onto the background, and I did that using foam squares. Now for this adorable girl, I used foam squares at the top and liquid adhesive at the bottom so she can be sitting in the front of that frame. And for the flowers now, I will do liquid adhesive at the bottom, and I have foam squares at the top. And this is where I can really begin to just nestle those in. And I'll put one on the other side. And a little liquid adhesive there where it touches the frame. And here are those hearts. And the main reason I added those is I just felt like I needed something to tie in color-wise to her dress and also go with the love theme of this stamp. I think this stamp is just so fun, and you just can't help but smile when you're coloring it and making a card with it. And I think it would just be fun to send to a girlfriend. And by putting these on those additional stems or leaves that are part of those flower dies, it sort of looks like we're growing some little floral hearts. And one thing I like about this scene is that it has a very whimsical look because the size of the flowers is not, I can't think of the word, but it doesn't fit the actual size of the girl. They're so much bigger than they would be in real life. And I think that just adds even more fun and adds to the magical look of that stamp. Felt like I needed to lighten things up here at the bottom, so I'm using this berry branches stamp and just tearing off a few little pieces that I can nestle in. Just add some brightness and lightness here at the bottom of this card. This is a very handy die to have just for instances like this, when you just need to tear off a few pieces and stick them in into your cards to finish things off. Now what's also fun with this antique frame die is you can make a shaped card. So I just wanted to show you that here. I die cut another panel, scored it up at the top, and I'm just putting my tape along the top of that scored line. Then I can take the panel that we've already created and layer it right on top. And you can see it creates a shaped card that opens up and can sit right on the table, but keeps that fun antique frame shape. So here's another look at that finished card design. I think this would be great for a Valentine's card, congratulations if someone maybe is getting engaged, or just for fun with the fun sentiment that comes with that stamp set. I thank you so much for watching today. If you enjoyed today's video, please give it a thumbs up and subscribe to our YouTube channel. You can also connect with Penny Black on Facebook, Pinterest, Twitter, Instagram, shop our online store, visit our website, and also view our blog for more ideas. And I'll link to all of those for you in the YouTube description box below. And here are the supplies used in creating this card.